After my 8-year-old daughter got carsick, my parents kicked her out of the car and abandoned her on an empty road because she was ruining the fun for the other grandchildren. I didn't shout. I took action. 2 hours later, their lives started falling apart. My name is Hannah Lewis. I'm 34 years old, and my life is built on a truce I'd mistaken for peace. The phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, a cheerful, insistent vibration that felt wrong in the quiet of the afternoon. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and glanced at the screen. It was Mom. I smiled, expecting a call to chat about the weather or a new recipe she'd tried. "Hi, Mom," I answered, leaning against the cool granite. "How's the drive going?" Her voice was bright, almost painfully so. "Oh, fantastic, honey, we're making great time. The kids are just so excited." She was on her way to the airport with Dad, my brother Caleb, his wife Jessica, and their 2 kids. It was the start of the big family trip to Orlando, the trip I'd mostly paid for. "That's great," I said, my smile feeling a little tight. My daughter Maddie, 8 years old, had been so excited to go with them. But she'd had a little stomach bug, and we'd decided it was best for her to fly out with my husband Nick and me in a couple of days, once she was feeling 100%. "So, there was just a little hiccup, honey," Mom said, her tone never wavering from its breezy cadence. "We had to leave Maddie somewhere safe." The words didn't connect. It was like she'd spoken in a different language. My blood went from warm to ice water in a single heartbeat. What do you mean, leave her?" "Oh, don't get all worked up," she chirped. "She got carsick again, you know how she gets, threw up all over the backseat. She was ruining the fun for the other kids, and honestly, Hannah, we have a flight to catch." My throat closed up. "Leave her? Where?" My mind couldn't form the picture. Nick, my husband, was working at his desk in the corner of our open-plan living room. He must have seen my face change because he stood up, his chair scraping softly on the hardwood floor. "Mom, where is my daughter?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "She's fine. A pin just popped up on your phone. She's right off the highway. We left her with her backpack. She's got water and a snack. You're not that far away." I looked at my phone. A map notification glowed on the screen. A single red pin dropped on a stretch of green with no name. "You left my 8-year-old child on the side of the road?" I whispered, the horror of it finally landing. "Don't be so dramatic, Hannah. Someone will be there for her soon." The line went dead before I could scream, before I could ask the 1,000 questions that were clawing their way up my throat. I just stood there, staring at the phone, the silence of my kitchen roaring in my ears. Nick was already grabbing the car keys from the hook by the door. He didn't ask a single question. He just looked at me, his face a grim mask of fury, and said, "Let's go." I was numb, a passenger in my own body. I remember repeating the address from the pin to the car's navigation system, my voice a monotone croak. 45 minutes away, the estimate glowed on the screen like a countdown to a bomb. The world outside the car windows blurred into a smear of green and gray. Every stoplight, every slow car in front of us felt like a personal act of cruelty. My mind, which was usually so orderly, had become a frantic slideshow of every horror story I'd ever heard. A little girl alone, a busy road. I kept picturing her face, her small, sweet face crumpled in confusion and fear. "She gets carsick. It's not a crime, it's not a moral failing, it's just something that happens. We have medicine for it, we have sick bags, we have strategies, we don't have abandonment." My thoughts flashed back to that morning. Maddie, my daughter, carefully packing her little purple backpack. It was her most prized possession. She'd laid out her new swimsuit, a book about dolphins, and her favorite stuffed bunny, a floppy-eared thing named Barnaby. She'd zipped it up with such care, her little brow furrowed in concentration. That backpack, sitting on the asphalt next to her, was a symbol of her smallness, of her absolute trust in the adults who were supposed to protect her. A trust they had just shattered. "They just left her," I said out loud, the words tasting like poison. "I know," Nick said, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "We're almost there." We finally turned off the main highway, the GPS telling us to take an exit onto a road I'd never seen before. It was a lonely, 2-lane stretch of blacktop. There were no houses, no gas stations, no signs of life, just thick woods on one side and empty, sun-scorched fields on the other. The heat rippled above the pavement. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. Where would they even pull over? And then I saw her. A tiny figure in a bright pink t-shirt, a splash of color against the drab shoulder of the road. She was sitting on her little purple backpack, her knees drawn up to her chest, looking so impossibly small against the vast, empty landscape. I was out of the car before Nick even brought it to a full stop, my feet pounding on the gravel shoulder. "Maddie," I screamed, her head snapped up. Her face was blotchy and swollen from crying, her big brown eyes huge and terrified. For a split second, she actually flinched as if she wasn't sure what was coming next. That tiny movement broke something deep inside me. "Mommy," she whispered as I fell to my knees in front of her. "Mommy, I threw up. Grandma said I was ruining the fun." I wrapped my arms around her, pulling her tight against my chest. She was trembling, her little body stiff with shock and fear. I could feel the frantic beat of her heart against mine. She smelled of sweat and tears and the faint, sour scent of vomit. "It's okay, baby," I murmured into her hair, rocking her back and forth. "It's okay, Mommy's here, you're safe." She finally let go, her little arms coming up to wrap around my neck in a desperate grip. "They just stopped the car," she sobbed, her words muffled against my shoulder. "Grandpa told me to get out. He put my backpack on the ground and he said you were coming, and then they just drove away. They didn't even wait to see your car." She had been alone for 20 minutes. 20 minutes of watching cars and trucks speed past, a blur of noise and wind. 20 minutes of being an 8-year-old girl discarded on the side of a road because she had a sensitive stomach. Behind me, I heard Nick's voice, low and hard as steel. He was on the phone. "Caleb," he said, leaving a message for my brother. "Your parents left Maddie on the side of a road. Call me." Now, I picked Maddie up, her legs wrapping around my waist like they did when she was a toddler. She felt heavier than she ever had before, weighted down by a cruelty she was too young to understand. I carried her back to the car, her face buried in my neck, and I didn't let go until she was safely buckled into her car seat, her little purple backpack on the seat beside her. Back home, the house felt different. The air was thick with what had happened. Maddie was finally asleep in her bed, her breathing still catching in little hitches and sobs. She was clutching Barnaby the bunny so tightly his floppy ears were crumpled. Nick and I sat in the dark kitchen, the only light coming from the faint glow of the stove clock. We didn't speak. There were no words big enough for the rage and the grief that filled the space between us. My phone, sitting on the table, buzzed. I flinched. Reluctantly, I picked it up. It was a notification from the family group chat. A picture had been posted. It was from Mom. It was a selfie of the whole group: Mom, Dad, Caleb, my brother, Jessica, his wife, and their 2 kids, grinning widely at the airport gate. They were all there, beaming into the camera, ready for their fun-filled vacation. Underneath the photo, my mother had written a caption: "Orlando bound, too bad some of us couldn't make it." The winky face emoji at the end felt like a slap. That was it. That was the moment. The switch flipped. The part of me that had spent a lifetime making excuses for them, smoothing things over, paying for peace, it died right there in my dark kitchen. It withered and turned to dust. All that was left was a cold, hard certainty. I swiped out of the chat and opened my banking app. My fingers moved with a strange precision, as if they belonged to someone else. I navigated to the scheduled payments. There it was. The $600 monthly transfer to my parents' emergency fund. An emergency fund I had been feeding for 5 straight years. I pressed cancel. A little box popped up on the screen. "Are you sure you want to cancel this recurring payment?" I've never been more sure of anything in my entire life. I pressed confirm. The quiet sound of that digital click was the loudest thing I've ever heard. It wasn't just the sound of a payment stopping. It was the sound of a guillotine. It was the sound of the end. The next morning, I woke up before the sun, the gray light barely filtering through the blinds. The rage from the night before hadn't disappeared. It had cooled and hardened into something sharp and clear. A plan. The truce was over. The war had begun and they didn't even know it yet. First, the money. That had always been the foundation of our broken relationship. I sat at my desk with a cup of coffee and my laptop and I started digging. I went through all my financial records, my bank statements, my credit card bills. I made a list not to send to them, but for me, I needed to see it, all of it in stark black and white. 5 years of that $600 transfer, $36,000, I stared at the number. I told myself it was for their peace of mind, for emergencies. Now I saw it for what it was, a subsidy, a fee I paid for a semblance of family. Then came the vacations. I scrolled through the years. The trip to the beach house where I covered the deposit and the grocery bill. The cruise where I'd topped up their share of the cost because their budget was tight. It was always tight. I calculated that I'd spent at least $1,500 to $2,000 of my own money on every single family trip, over and above my own family's share. The list grew longer, a monument to my own willful blindness. As I was staring at the totals, my phone rang. It was Mom. I looked at her name on the screen and felt nothing but a cold void. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, the notification popped up. I played the message, putting the phone on speaker. Her voice, syrupy, sweet, and utterly oblivious, filled the quiet room. "Hi honey, just calling to let you know we landed. The flight was great. Hope Maddie's feeling better. She's probably learned her lesson about overeating before a car ride. Call me when you get a chance." Not a single word of apology, not a hint of concern, just blame wrapped in a pretty, condescending bow. Maddie's fault. My fault for raising a child who gets carsick. This message was the final nail in the coffin of the person I used to be. I closed my spreadsheets and opened a new email. I addressed it to my parents and to Caleb. The subject line was simple: canceled trip expenses. The body of the email was even simpler. I wrote that due to the events of the previous day, Maddie would obviously not be joining them. I then attached a professionally formatted invoice for $2,050. I itemized it clearly: 1 non-refundable child's airfare, 1 child's share of the 7-night hotel stay, 1 prepaid child's theme park ticket. At the bottom, in bold letters, it said, "Payment due in 30 days. I hit send. My dad called exactly 2 minutes after the email landed in his inbox. He didn't bother with a hello. His voice was a roar of indignation. "What the hell is this, Hannah? An invoice? Are you insane? Are you trying to bankrupt us?" I took a deep breath and kept my own voice perfectly level, a calm lake of ice. "It's for the expenses related to the trip Maddie is no longer on. She's the one who got sick," he sputtered, his voice cracking with rage. "You can't charge us for that, and what's this about the monthly transfer?" "Your mother got an alert that it was canceled?" "That's correct," I said. "I've stopped it. Permanently." I could hear him breathing heavily on the other end of the line, the sound of a man whose entire world had just been tilted off its axis. "You make more than all of us combined," he shouted, falling back on the old, familiar argument. "It's your duty to help this family. It's what you do." The words hung in the air, and I finally saw them for the chains they were. "My only duty," I replied, my voice as cold and hard as a diamond, "is to protect my daughter. You left her on a road." He didn't deny it, he didn't even try, he justified it. "We had a flight. We had other kids to think of. It was a perfectly rational decision, a rational decision." He had said the words, he had admitted it. The conversation was over, there was nothing left to say. I hung up the phone while he was still yelling my name. Next on my list, the co-signed loans, the heavy chains I'd willingly put on years ago, the mortgage on their house and the lease on their fancy SUV. I was young and stupid when I signed them, desperate for their approval. They'd told me it was just a formality, a way for them to get a better interest rate because my credit was so good. It wasn't a formality, it was a safety net for them and a cage for me. It was time to rattle the bars. I called the mortgage company first. After navigating the automated menu, I was connected with a polite, professional-sounding man named Mr. Henderson. I explained the situation calmly. I was a co-signer on the loan for my parents' home and I wanted to begin the process of having my name removed. He was helpful but firm. "Ma'am, to do that, the other parties on the loan would have to refinance," he explained. "That means they would have to apply for a whole new loan based only on their own credit and income." "I understand," I said. "Please begin that process." There was a pause and the sound of typing. "Okay, I'm pulling up their file now," Mr. Henderson said. Another pause. "Ma'am, I have to be honest with you. Based on the original application information, I'm not sure they would qualify for the current loan amount on their own. And with interest rates where they are today, well, even if they did qualify, their monthly payment would likely go up significantly." I felt a grim sense of validation. Their comfortable, low payment, the one they bragged about to their friends, was entirely dependent on me. It was built on my good name. "I understand the implications," I told him. "Please send them the necessary paperwork to begin the process." I hung up, a strange sense of detachment washing over me. This was the house I grew up in, the place where I had my first sleepover, my first heartbreak. But it had never truly felt like a home. It was just a building where I learned my role. I called the car leasing company next. It was almost the exact same story. When I explained that I wanted my name removed from the lease agreement for their luxury SUV, the representative put me on a brief hold. When she came back, her tone was businesslike. "Okay, Miss Lewis. I see here that you are the primary name on this lease. To remove you, we would have to terminate the current agreement. Your parents would then have to reapply and qualify for a new lease on their own." I knew with absolute certainty that they couldn't. Their credit was mediocre at best, and their retirement income was fixed. The only reason they were driving a $60,000 vehicle was because my name and my credit score were on the paperwork. "Please contact them to discuss their options," I said, knowing full well their only options would be to return the car or start paying a rate they couldn't possibly afford. Just as I was ending the call, a text message came through. It was from Caleb. "Mom and Dad are freaking out," it read. "They said you're trying to take the house and the car. You need to stop this. You're tearing the family apart." I stared at the words on the screen, "tearing the family apart." As if it were some beautiful, pristine thing I was vandalizing. As if it wasn't already a toxic, dysfunctional mess held together by my money and my silence. I typed back a single sentence. "They left my 8-year-old daughter on the side of a road." I hit send. He didn't reply. His silence was the only support I ever got from him, and I knew it wasn't support for me. It was the silence of a coward who didn't want to get involved, who didn't want to risk his own comfortable position as the golden boy. It was the silence I had come to expect. A week passed in a tense, buzzing silence. I knew they were in Orlando, trying to enjoy the vacation I'd paid for while this storm gathered back home. I didn't hear from them directly. The silence was their punishment, their way of showing me how much I had wronged them. But then my phone started buzzing with notifications, one after another. It wasn't a text message or a phone call, it was Facebook. My mom had taken the fight public. She had posted a long, rambling message on the neighborhood community page, a page followed by hundreds of people from our town, including friends, neighbors, and members of their church. It was a masterfully crafted piece of emotional manipulation, full of vague language and dripping with self-pity. She wrote about the challenges of modern family life and the pain of sudden hardships that can arise without warning. She talked about how some people forget the meaning of family, how they let money become more important than love. She mentioned, in passing, that their own daughter was now demanding money from them after a disappointing trip cancellation, painting herself as the victim of a cold, greedy child. She finished with a flourish, lamenting how hard it is to be a parent and grandparent in today's ungrateful world, and asking for everyone's prayers and support during this difficult and confusing time. Of course, she left out one small, crucial detail. The part where they abandoned their 8-year-old granddaughter on the side of a highway because she got carsick. The comments started pouring in immediately. "Oh, Marla, I'm so sorry you're going through this. Sending prayers your way. You're such a wonderful mother and grandmother. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Family is everything, some people forget that. Each comment was a small, sharp sting, a testament to the perfect image she had cultivated for decades. Nick read the post over my shoulder, his jaw tight with anger. "You can't let this stand, Hannah. She's trying to poison the well." I knew he was right. My first instinct was to lash out, to post a furious, emotional rebuttal. But I stopped myself. That's what she wanted. She wanted a messy, public fight where she could play the long-suffering matriarch. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. I wouldn't stoop to her level. No drama, no emotion. Just cold, hard facts. I sat down at my desk and opened my phone. I scrolled back through my text messages from that horrible day. I found the thread with my mother. First, I took a screenshot of the map she had sent me, showing the pin dropped on that empty, nameless road. Next, I took a screenshot of the smiling airport selfie she had posted in the group chat just minutes after driving away from my terrified child. Then, I found the voicemail from her, the one where she blamed Maddie for getting sick and told me she'd learned her lesson. I transcribed it, word for word. I sat there for a long time looking at the pieces of evidence I had assembled. This wasn't about winning an argument. It wasn't about being right. It was about protecting my daughter's truth. My parents had built their entire reputation on a carefully constructed image of being pillars of the community. I was about to hold up a mirror. I decided not to make my own post on the main page. That would just add to the noise. Instead, I would reply directly to my mother's post. That way, every single person who had offered her their sympathy would see my response right below it. It would be a direct, surgical strike. I navigated back to the Facebook post. The number of sympathetic comments had grown. My fingers were steady as I tapped the reply button. "Hi Mom," I began. "I'm sorry you're having a difficult time. Since you've made this a public discussion, I feel it's important to clarify the details of the disappointing trip cancellation you mentioned." I laid it out in a simple, numbered list, stripping away all the emotion and leaving only the facts. 1. Maddie got carsick on the way to the airport, something you've known she has struggled with since she was a toddler. 2. You and Dad made the decision to leave her on the side of a 2-lane road alone because you were worried about missing your flight. 3. You sent me a pin to her location and drove away, leaving her there for 20 minutes until I could get to her. 4. The $50 I invoiced you for was for her non-refundable airfare and hotel share, which I had already paid for on my credit card. I didn't attach the screenshots yet. I didn't need to. I would hold them in reserve, my ace in the hole. I finished the comment with one final clear statement. "I have stopped paying the $600 a month into your account and have started the process of removing my name from your loans because my priority is and always will be Maddie's physical and emotional safety." I took a deep breath and hit post. The reaction was immediate and electric. The flood of sympathetic comments for my mother stopped abruptly, as if a tap had been turned off. A long, stunned silence fell over the comment thread. You could almost feel hundreds of people rereading my words, then scrolling back up to my mother's vague post, the two stories refusing to line up. Then, the first question appeared. It was from a neighbor, Sarah, a woman I knew casually from neighborhood block parties. "Marla, is this true? Did you really leave a child on the side of the road?" My dad, never one to let my mother fight her own battles and always convinced of his own righteousness, jumped in to defend her. His arrogance was his undoing. He replied directly to Sarah, his tone dismissive and condescending. "It was a safe spot and we told her mom to come get her. Any rational person would have done it. We had a flight and other kids to think about. This is a private family matter and shouldn't be discussed here." That was it. The confession, he admitted it right there in black and white for the entire neighborhood to see. Any rational person would have done it. He wasn't just admitting to the act, he was defending it as a logical choice. My fingers moved quickly. I took a screenshot of his comment. This was the proof I needed, straight from the source. The single sentence that dismantled their entire defense. The tone of the entire thread shifted in an instant. The silence broke and a new wave of comments began, this time not directed at my mother's post but at my father's reply. "Greg, that's not rational, that's dangerous and neglectful. You left an 8-year-old child by herself on purpose. I'm speechless." A family matter, you made it a public matter when you posted asking for sympathy, Marla. My mother must have seen the tide turning against them. Within minutes, her entire original post was deleted, but it was too late. The internet never forgets. The screenshots were already being shared in private messages, spreading through the community like wildfire. Their carefully polished image had just been shattered, and they had handed me the hammer themselves. 2 weeks after the Facebook disaster, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. It was Mr. Henderson from the mortgage company. His voice was polite and professional, as always. "Miss Lewis, I'm calling to follow up regarding the property on Elm Street," he said. "I wanted to let you know that we have not yet heard from your parents. They missed their scheduled meeting to discuss their refinancing options." I wasn't surprised. They were masters of avoidance, likely hoping I would just forget the whole thing and let it go. "The bank has now sent them a formal letter," Mr. Henderson continued. "It states that they have 60 days to refinance the mortgage without your name on it. If they fail to do so, the bank may exercise its right to call the loan due." I knew what that meant. It was a fancy way of saying they'd have to pay back the entire remaining balance of the loan all at once. An impossibility for them. Their only real option was to sell the house. There was a slight hesitation in Mr. Henderson's voice. "Miss Lewis, your father did call last week. He said that you were just being emotional and that you would likely change your mind. He asked if we could put a hold on the process. I'm calling to ask if you would be willing to reconsider." "No," I said, the word clear and final. "My decision stands." My signature had given them a life they couldn't afford on their own. My good credit had built the walls of that house. It was time for that to end. "Thank you for your help, Mr. Henderson," I said and hung up. There was no feeling of triumph, just a hollow ache. It was the house I grew up in, filled with ghosts of a childhood I was only now beginning to understand. But it was never really a home. It was just the stage for their long-running play. The car lease situation unraveled even more quickly. Because my name was the primary one on the agreement, my official request to be removed triggered an immediate review of their account. They were contacted by the leasing company and offered a new lease on the same luxury SUV, but at a rate that was nearly double what they had been paying. The new rate was based on their own mediocre credit score, not mine. Predictably, they exploded. I later learned from a very apologetic customer service manager that my father had screamed at her over the phone, demanding they honor the original deal. She had noted their hostile and uncooperative attitude in the account file. They refused the new offer and, I assume, thought they could just ignore the problem. They missed their next payment, probably assuming I would get the late notice and, in a panic, cave and fix everything like I always did. I didn't. A week later, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from Sarah, the neighbor from the Facebook thread. It was a photo. In the picture, a large tow truck was parked in front of my parents' house, its hydraulic arm hooked up to their shiny black SUV. It was happening in the middle of the afternoon, in broad daylight, a public spectacle for the whole neighborhood to see. Sarah's text underneath the photo simply said, "Just thought you should know. I'm on your side, Hannah." It was the first time anyone from that part of my life, the world of my parents, had chosen my side so explicitly. That simple sentence meant more to me than she could ever know. My parents' status and image were deeply tied to that expensive car. Losing it like that, having it hauled away from their curb like a piece of junk, wasn't just a financial setback. It was a profound public humiliation. That evening, my brother Caleb finally called. His voice was tight and strained, the voice of a man caught in a trap. "Mom and Dad came over," he said, skipping any pleasantries. "They're a mess. They wanted me to help them. They wanted me to co-sign a new loan for the house." "And what did you say?" I asked, already knowing the answer. I couldn't, Hannah. Jessica wouldn't let us. Our finances are tied up right now." He paused, then delivered the line that sealed his fate in my eyes. "We have our own kids to think about." The exact same excuse. The same justification they had used for leaving my daughter on the road. The irony was so thick and bitter it almost made me laugh. He was always the golden boy, the one they praised, the one they invested all their hopes in. I was just the reliable one, the one who paid the bills. Now that the bills had come due, the golden son was offering nothing but the same selfish excuses. He was their son in every way. "Are you happy now?" he asked, a pathetic, wounded tone in his voice. "Are you happy watching them fall apart like this?" "This isn't about my happiness, Caleb," I told him, my voice flat. "It's about their choices. It has always been about their choices." He had nothing to say to that. We hung up, and I knew that was another cord I had just severed for good. The 60-day deadline from the bank loomed. I tried not to think about it, focusing on Maddie, on work, on my own life. But one afternoon, I had to drive through my old neighborhood to get to a client's office. As I turned onto their street, I saw it. Hammered into their front lawn, slightly crooked, was a "for sale" sign. The colors were bright and jarring against the familiar backdrop of their perfectly manicured rose bushes. It was a quick sales sign, the kind that realtors use when the owners need to sell fast. A motivated seller price. They were trying to get out from under the bank's ultimatum before they had no choice at all. This was it. The first, undeniable physical proof that I had been the load-bearing wall in the flimsy structure of their lives. The public image they had curated for decades, the stable, church-going pillars of the community with the nice house and the luxury car, was crumbling into dust. They weren't just losing a house and a car, they were losing their props, the things that told the world they were successful and secure. The ticking clock of the bank's deadline wasn't a bomb anymore. It was just the sound of consequences arriving right on schedule. I didn't slow down, I didn't stop to stare. I just kept driving, my eyes fixed on the road ahead. I had my own home to get to. A few weeks later, I got a text from my mom. It was the first direct contact since the disastrous phone call with my dad. "We're clearing out the house this week. You need to come get your childhood things from the attic before the new owners take possession." It felt like a trap. A final, desperate attempt to lure me back onto their territory, to use nostalgia as a weapon to pull me back into the drama. But the thought of my things being thrown out or left behind for strangers gnawed at me, so I went. I chose a Tuesday morning, a time I knew they'd be out running errands. I let myself in with my old key, which, to my surprise, still worked. The house was cold and hollow, half empty and echoing with every footstep. It felt smaller than I remembered, sadder. Cardboard boxes were stacked against the walls, the whole place smelling of dust and endings. In the attic, I found the box with my name scrawled on it in my dad's handwriting. I lifted the lid. It was a time capsule of my youth, old report cards with straight A's, participation ribbons from sports I was never very good at, and stacks of old photographs. I pulled out a photo of me and Caleb taken in the living room downstairs. He was 12, I was 10. He was in his baseball uniform holding a gleaming gold trophy, a proud, toothy grin on his face. I was standing slightly behind him, half in his shadow, out of focus. And I realized with a sudden, painful clarity that this picture was a perfect metaphor for my entire childhood. My role was always to be the background, the support system, the one who made his victories possible while remaining quietly out of focus. Digging deeper in the box, I found something else. My first checkbook register from the summer I was 16 and worked as a lifeguard. I flipped through the neat, careful entries, and there they were, a pattern I'd never noticed before, little notes in the margins. $50 lent to Dad for gas. $100 Mom's car repair, $25 Caleb's movie ticket. It started that early. I had been their emergency fund my entire life. This wasn't a family. It was an economy, and I was its most reliable and unacknowledged asset. I closed the box. I slid the lid back on and pushed it into the corner. I wouldn't be taking it with me. I couldn't bring that history, that ledger of my own diminishment, into the home I was building with Nick and Maddie. As I was walking out, my old key in my hand, I saw an open notebook on the kitchen counter. It was their attempt at a new budget, a desperate scramble to figure out their new financial reality. I saw lines for rent, utilities, groceries, and then I saw a line that made my blood run cold. Under the heading Monthly Income, my old $600 payment was listed, but it had been crossed out, the ink angry and thick. They hadn't seen it as help. They hadn't seen it as a gift or a loan. They saw it as revenue. As a dependable stream of income they were entitled to. That was the truth that changed everything. This was never about love or family obligation. It was a transaction, and I had just closed my account. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was an email notification from a travel website, a fare alert I'd set up months ago. Sale on flights to Orlando, the subject line screamed in cheerful orange letters. Right there, standing in the shell of my childhood home, smelling the dust of my past, I made the irreversible choice. I walked over to the counter, placed my old key beside their pathetic budget, and turned around. I walked out the front door and didn't look back. I would not come back. In the car, before I even started the engine, I pulled up the travel website. I booked 3 round-trip tickets to Orlando for the following month. For me, for Nick, and for Maddie, the money I would have sent my parents for the next 3 months, their income, had just paid for it in full. That night, after I clicked confirm on those flight reservations, I told Maddie we were going to Orlando. She was sitting on the kitchen counter, legs swinging, a smear of peanut butter on her chin where she'd been stealing bites from a sandwich. Her face lit up in a way that fixed something inside me. "Really?" she asked, eyes huge and bright. Just us, I said. I set the phone down and held her like I'd been holding that image of her on the road, tight, careful, like she might drift away if I loosened my grip. "And Daddy too, nobody's leaving you behind. If you get sick, we'll pull over, we'll wait as long as you need, we'll give you crackers and water and time to feel better, we'll never leave you." She curled inward, small and trusting. Barnaby the bunny was tucked under her chin as if for good luck. She leaned her head on my shoulder and sighed, a sound of relief so complete it warmed me. That little sigh was worth every tally mark of the money I'd spent and every late-night apology call I would refuse. It was worth the cost of burning a bridge that had always been shaky. The plan was simple: stop paying for other people's choices and start spending that money on building safety and memories for my own family. I'd already booked the tickets. The money I would have sent to Mom and Dad for the next 3 months paid for meals, a nicer hotel room with a separate sleeping area for Maddie, and some small treats I promised her. I scheduled on-call time off with work so Nick could take 2 full days without checking emails. I set up a reminder to call the pediatrician for an anti-nausea pack and packed 2 different kinds of motion bands in Maddie's backpack. I made a list of rides we'd try and rides we'd skip based on what she felt ready for. I wrote safety across every plan in the margin. There was more to it than a trip. It was about rewriting the script of what our family did when things went wrong. When she felt sick, we slowed down. When she felt small and scared, we made a place that made her feel protected. My revenge wasn't about watching them suffer. It was about making sure my daughter never carried that small, stunned weight again. I wanted her strongest memories to be of laughter, not of being set down on the side of a road with the sun beating on her knuckles and the cars whooshing past. I told Nick all of it over coffee the next morning. He listened, his jaw clenched, but his eyes had that mix of pride and sorrow I'd come to expect. "You did the right thing," he said simply. "You protected her, and now they'll try everything else," I said. I wasn't being dramatic, I was being realistic. People who lose privilege rarely change quietly. They lash out, they find new ways to fight. We'd already seen the first move, Mom's public post, and I knew the next rounds would be uglier. They came quick. First, it was whispered conversations at church, then calls from old friends who sounded like they were reading from a script. My mom started a smear campaign, but she didn't come at me with facts. She came at me with feelings, a story she could tell easily. I was unstable, I was mean, my husband was controlling me, I was withholding their only granddaughter out of spite. It was a tidy narrative designed to get people to pick a side based on emotion rather than truth. She told anyone who would listen that I was having a breakdown, that I was making everyone's life miserable, that I wasn't the daughter she raised. One afternoon, my phone lit up with a call from Linda, an old neighbor who used to babysit for us. Linda's voice was thin and anxious. "Are you okay, Hannah?" she asked before I could reply. "Your mother is so upset. She says you won't even take her calls. She's worried sick. We've all been praying for you," I answered as calmly as I could. "Thanks, Linda. I appreciate that. Mom's had a hard time with her finances." "She's calling a lot. You don't seem like yourself," Linda persisted. "Are you sure this is the right way?" I could hear the pleading in her voice, the tilt toward the side that had gathered around my parents for so long. I felt the old reflex explain, soothe, placate rise in me. Then I thought of Maddie on the shoulder of that road and let the reflex die. "I'm sure," I said. "This is about safety, that's all." After that, a small pattern emerged. Someone from their church would call. A neighbor would text, apologizing a while in advance for the awkwardness the next Sunday. It was as if an invisible script were being handed out. Feel bad for mom and dad, don't ask hard questions. The smear was quieter than the Facebook post, but it was more corrosive. It reached people face to face and in prayer groups where nuance is often lost and feelings carry the day. Then, one morning, my phone buzzed with a calendar invite. Pastor John had requested a meeting with Nick and me at the church office. He used the word "immediate" in the note, and he asked that we come alone. I accepted because I knew he was a door we ought to walk through if we could get him to hear the facts. His office smelled like lemon cleaner and old hymnals. Light came through the tall windows and made dust motes hang in the air like tiny planets. Pastor John was kinder in person than he was on the phone. His hands were warm when he shook mine. He started the meeting with the usual church-laden words: family, forgiveness, reconciliation. He looked at us with that patient concern he reserves for hurt parishioners. "I've been hearing from both sides," he said. "I thought we should talk. It's important to heal the family." I listened while he talked, then I told him the truth. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't let anger push me over the edge. I laid out the simple facts. The map pin, the airport selfie, the voicemail where mom blamed Maddie, my canceled payments, the invoice, and my call to the mortgage company. I didn't dress it up. I let the plainness of it be the verdict. When I showed him my dad's comment from the Facebook page, any rational person would have done it. The expression on Pastor John's face changed. The pastoral softness went out of his eyes and was replaced by something like shock and then by quiet, careful thought. He leaned back in his chair and read the words again. "I didn't know," he said finally. "I was only hearing how hard things have been for them. I thought it was a family disagreement." I handed him the screenshots of the map and the airport selfie and the voicemail transcription. His fingers trembled a little as he scrolled. For the first time since all this started, I saw an ally who was willing to listen to the unvarnished truth. "You've given me a lot to think about," he said. "I'll speak to them. They have to understand accountability, not just consequences. If they want to see Maddie, they need to show real remorse." It wasn't the end of things. He couldn't force anyone to change, and he couldn't make the neighborhood unsee what they'd seen online. But the meeting mattered because it stopped the church from becoming an arm of the smear campaign. Pastor John promised to hold them to standards of accountability. That promise wasn't empty. It meant they couldn't just show up at every potluck and expect to be treated like victims without answering for what they'd done. Even so, the safe spaces I once took for granted began to shift under my feet. Grocery store aisles felt like gauntlets. The woman who used to walk her golden retriever past my fence gave me a clipped nod and then turned away. A mother from Maddie's school who'd once lent me classroom supplies started passing by the pickup line with her eyes down. At the PTA meeting, a woman from Mom's church group noisily cleared her throat when I tried to volunteer for the bake sale. It was the kind of small, pointed thing that stung more than any direct insult. The message was clear. "You're causing trouble for people we like, and we're going to make you feel the cost." Sometimes a young mom would stop me in the parking lot, voice low. "I don't know everything, Hannah. I heard different things." She'd look at me like she wanted to believe me, but the pull of the church, the network of shared history, was strong. People didn't want to pick a side that might cost them friendships. I understood that. I also understood that these were small sacrifices I had to accept if it meant I could keep Maddie safe. Nick and I talked about whether we should move, whether we should shelter ourselves more, whether we should sue or publicly press things further. Night after night, practical solutions and the cold, small logistics of life crowded into our conversations. But every time I felt fear or doubt, I'd look at Maddie's sleeping face and remember the way she'd curled into my chest on that road. I'd remember the promise I made in the dark kitchen. The isolation hurt, but it was a price I was willing to pay. In the evenings, when the house finally quieted and the day's sharp edges softened, I'd bring out the Orlando itinerary and tick things off. I'd pack extra crackers in her backpack, cushion the stress with small letters that said, "We love you." Those small acts knitted a new kind of safety between us. People could whisper and turn away, but whenever Maddie looked at me and smiled, I knew the ledger had been balanced in the only way that mattered. The envelope was thick and official-looking, the kind of paper that makes your stomach drop before you even open it. I nearly dropped it when I saw the return address, some law office 3 towns over. My hands felt clumsy as I slit it with a butter knife. Inside was one page, dense with formal language and a demand: repay parental loans made toward my college education. There was a list of numbers, a total owed, and the polite but hard line that if I didn't respond, they might take further action. For a second, I felt that old panic, the one that used to make me hand over my paycheck because I didn't want to watch a fight. Then I remembered the 2-lane road and the tiny knees on the asphalt and the way Dad had typed. Any rational person would have done it. I set the paper down and called Nick into the kitchen. He read it, his face doing that slow hardening thing he does when he's thinking through a problem. "It's nonsense," he said. "They're trying to intimidate you. They probably expect you to pay out of guilt." I laughed then, a sharp, short sound that surprised both of us. "Of course they are." The idea that they could turn every act of supposed generosity into a bill now that the flow of money had stopped felt like the last, bitter twist. Mom and Dad had always been good at making the world think they were owed. Now they were trying to make it official with a lawyer's letter. Nick set the letter on the counter and said, "We'll write back, tell them to get lost, but maybe don't do that without checking everything first." So I started digging. I'd done spreadsheets before, but this felt different, more personal, more revealing. I pulled up old accounts I hadn't looked at in years. The joint savings account they'd put my name on when I turned 16, the account where Mom had told me they were putting our family emergency money. I logged in with my old username, the one I'd used when I was still doing favors for everyone without thinking twice. The numbers were like stepping stones across a river my parents had built and never told me about. Small transfers at first, 50 here, 100 there, entries in the register I'd assumed were casual loans. But as I scrolled back year by year, the pattern became a trail. Month after month, a chunk of the money I'd sent went out again, not into repairs or utilities, but into an account that, in the memo line, said Caleb car payment, Caleb student loan, Caleb down payment. My chest tightened. I clicked another month. There it was again, almost routine. $600 comes in from me, then a transfer goes out to Caleb. There were notes, sometimes just help or see, sometimes specifics. The dates lined up with the times Caleb bought a new car or moved into a nicer apartment. I felt a hot wash of anger and a deeper, colder thing, betrayal that tasted like salt. I printed the statements and highlighted the entries. The room smelled faintly of coffee and the printer whirred like an accomplice. For years I'd told myself I was helping a family in trouble. For years they'd been using my help to feed someone else's comforts. All the praise they'd poured on Caleb, such a hard worker, such a blessing, had been painted over a ledger paid for by me. I called Caleb without thinking. My thumb hovered over his number for a long beat before I told myself to just do it. The phone rang 3 times. "How much?" I asked the second he said hello. I didn't do small talk. I didn't ask about work or the kids. "How much of my money went to you?" There was a short, stunned silence on his end. I could hear the rustle of something, maybe papers, maybe Jessica in the background. "Hannah, what are you talking about?" he said, and his voice had that particular mix of confusion and defensiveness he always used when things got awkward. "The transfers," I said, "from the account Mom put me on, the notes say Caleb car payment. Caleb down payment. How long did you know?" he stammered. "I didn't know it was from you. They said they were helping me out. They handled it." I thought it was from them. I felt the blood lift to my face, a hot, ridiculous thing that made my voice sharper than I wanted it. "You're 36, Caleb. You didn't notice your parents suddenly making regular deposits into your account. You never thought to ask?" He swallowed audibly. "Hannah, I swear I didn't know. They said what?" I cut in. "That their daughter, the one who was always trying to keep peace, would cover the costs. That's what they said. They treated me like the bank." There was a long pause. I could hear his breath. Finally he said, quieter, "We have our own kids to think about, Han. Jessica and I, we have responsibilities." The words landed like the same excuse Dad had made. My throat tightened. "You knew when it helped you," I said. "You kept taking praise and never asked where it came from. When it mattered, when the payments stopped, you told me I was tearing the family apart." "I'm not taking sides," he said weakly. "You already took sides," I said. "You took the side that got checks." I didn't wait for him to answer. "Don't ever call me again, Caleb." I put the phone down and let the silence fill the kitchen like a cold draft. I felt unmoored in that moment, as if everything I'd been building inside about who my family was had been removed with a blade. The financial trail made their emotional favoritism concrete. It wasn't just that they loved him more. They had literally fed him with my money. That realization stung more than the car being towed or the house going on the market. It cut into the childhood I'd been rewriting all these years. That night, the voicemails started. I let my phone buzz and ring and then go to the little gray bubble of messages no one wants to hear. They came in the dark hours, the kind of hours when people are honest or desperate or both. Mom's voice would fill the speaker, thin and high like a thread pulled too tight. "Hannah, honey, please," she would say in one. "I can't sleep. We're so lonely. We miss you. We miss Maddie. Please call me back. I'm so sorry for everything." "God, we miss you." Sometimes she'd be crying, small hiccuping sobs that made the edges of the words soft. Other times she'd be furious, yelling about how I'd ripped them off, how ungrateful I was, how this was all on me. She'd alternate begging and blaming in the same call. There was one voicemail where she said almost everything except the one thing I'd been waiting to hear. She wept and said, "I'm so sorry, our lives are hard, we're hurting. We never meant for anyone to get hurt." She paused, then added, "I'm so sorry you had to go through this." The apology curled like smoke and dissipated before it hit the target. She never once said, "I'm sorry we left Maddie alone on the side of the road." She apologized for the state of her life, for the discomfort she felt, for how hard things were now that the checks had stopped. But she never acknowledged the event that started everything. That omission felt deliberate, like a refusal to see the harm as harm. It was as if she wanted sympathy for losing status, not accountability for her choices. Dad's voicemails were different. He was blustery at first, trying to be strong. He would insist we reconcile, tell me I was making a mistake, that family was family, that people make poor choices sometimes. Then, in later messages, his voice would crack. "We're losing everything, Hannah," he'd say. "We didn't mean for this." He'd plead for help, for anything, then hang up when I didn't call back. They started showing up at odd hours, 2 in the morning, 5 in the morning, like a steady drum. My phone lit up on the nightstand, the screen small and accusing. I'd see Mom's name and feel a hollow in my chest. I didn't answer. I let them build up and fall away like waves against a rock. Hearing their voices and not answering produced a strange, aching kind of grief. It wasn't just that they were calling. It was that no one ever said the one thing that might have softened what I'd done. Not one "I'm sorry we left Maddie" had come. The apologies were all for themselves. The thing I had wanted most, a recognition that they had endangered my child, was a thing they couldn't or wouldn't say. That refusal made my decision feel less like discipline and more like a severing. With every voicemail I didn't answer, I felt a part of my old life falling away. With every unanswered ring, the past arrangements I'd upheld for years unraveled. Sleep became a thin, brittle thing. I would wake in the middle of the night with the weight of the decisions I'd made pressing against my ribs. Nick would put a hand on my back and say, "You did the right thing," and that helped, but it didn't erase the loneliness. The calls and the betrayal by Caleb left me in a kind of suspended loneliness I'd never known before. The people who held my history now recoiled from me or pretended to, as if the comfortable stories they'd told about us had been disrupted. Old friends leaned away, church potlucks had pointed silences. I walked through my days with a low hum of estrangement, like I was moving through a room filled with glass. Sometimes at night I would lie awake and think of small, ordinary things: the living room couch where we used to watch cartoons, the smell of Mom's chicken soup when I got home sick from school, the way Dad clapped the dust off his hands after a weekend project. Those memories arrived with both tenderness and a sour aftertaste. Were those moments ever real? Had I imagined the warmth? The doubt was a small, cruel thing that gnawed. Nick saw it in my face. He read the way I flinched when my phone buzzed. He held me and let me cry without needing answers. "You gave them a chance," he'd say. "They chose what they chose." Those words steadied me like the firm edge of a table against which I could brace myself. I missed having someone who shared the old map of me, the same stories, the same embarrassing childhood details. It felt like I'd had my roots cut. There was no one left who could tell the family jokes that meant nothing to the world but everything to me. The loneliness wasn't dramatic, it was quiet and insistent. It sat across from me at dinner and watched while I chopped vegetables. It walked with me to Maddie's school pickup and waited in the car while I signed permission slips. Still, even in that deep, raw place, something else was growing, a fierce, steady relief. The relief came in small, definite moments: Maddie sleeping safe in her bed with Barnaby tucked under her chin, Nick's hand warm in mine, the Orlando tickets in my email glowing like a promise. I'd traded a messy, compromised past for the possibility of an honest future. The cost was heavy. The weight of it made me ache. But every time I felt doubt, I'd remember the shoulder I found on that highway, the tiny legs curled around me, and I'd know the choice I'd made was the right one, no matter how quiet the consequences might be. That night, tucking Maddie in, I felt something soft and sharp at once. She looked up at me with those serious little girl eyes and asked, "Mommy, are you sad about Grandma and Grandpa?" The question was small but heavy, like a stone she'd found and wanted me to carry. I told her the truth. "Yes, sometimes I am." I tried to keep my voice steady, not to teach her to hide big feelings. She patted my hand the way she'd seen me do for her. "It's okay," she said, as if she'd discovered a cure for grown-up sorrow at 8 years old. "We're going to Orlando soon. You, me, and Daddy, that's my real family." That simple sentence cracked me open and put me back together. The ache didn't vanish, but it shifted. In the space where the past used to sit, small and heavy, there was room now for a possibility that felt fragile and newly planted. The family I'd known, full of performative smiles, subtle slights, and unpaid debts, was not the only picture. I had a real one right in front of me. A sleepy, sticky-handed child clutching Barnaby the bunny, 2 plane tickets blinking in my inbox, a husband willing to drive through the night to fetch what mattered. I kissed her forehead and promised what I'd already decided. We'll always slow down, we'll always wait, we'll never leave each other on the side of a road. She breathed out, long and trusting, and I held her a little longer, feeling the weight of what I'd chosen. That night, the fear that had been so loud for weeks softened into something steadier, a resolve to build new memories that would crowd out the old ones. The Saturday before our Orlando trip had a bright, nervous buzz in the house. We were packing, laughing at ridiculous travel hacks, and folding a swimsuit Maddie insisted we couldn't forget. Nick was checking the car battery and the packing list on his phone. I had just snapped a photo of Maddie holding Barnaby to send to my sister when the doorbell rang. Nick checked the baby monitor and caught my eye. "It's them," he said, like it was anyone's guess. My stomach dropped the way it did the day I saw Maddie on the road. I felt that old urge to hide, to curl the house into an island and pretend we weren't home. But through the hallway Maddie peered around, curiosity bright and innocent. I couldn't make her step back into fear. I told Nick to take Maddie to the backyard to play for a while. "I'll handle this," I said. My voice felt steady in my own ears. I opened the door and saw them on the porch, Mom and Dad looking smaller, as if the moves and the money had worn them down. Dad held a paper grocery bag clumsily. Mom clutched her purse like a lifeline. "Hannah," Mom began, voice trembling in that practiced way that used to get everyone to lean in. "We need to talk." They had never shown up unannounced at our house before. The suddenness of it felt like a test. I stood in the doorway, the screen door making a soft click behind me, and I felt the distance between who I had been and who I had become. I didn't invite them in. "There's nothing to talk about," I said, calm and clear. My words landed like stones. Dad pushed the grocery bag forward like a peace offering, and the smell of fresh bread and oranges leaked out. "We brought gifts for Maddie. For her trip," he said, voice a practiced charm I'd heard 1,000 times. I didn't bother to look in the bag. "Maddie doesn't need gifts," I replied. "She needs grandparents who don't abandon her when she's sick." Mom's face crumpled. She started to cry in a way that felt rehearsed, as if the tears were part of a script she'd practiced in the apartment mirror. "It was a mistake," she said, the words spilling into one another. "A terrible mistake. We're sorry." "We've lost everything because of it?" "No," I said, and I could see Dad flinch at the word. "You lost everything because you spent 30 years treating me like a resource and Maddie like an inconvenience." The roadside was just the day the bill came due. Dad's face went red. "After everything we did for you," he barked, "we put a roof over your head, and I paid the mortgage on it for the last 5 years, I snapped back. "I paid for your car, I paid for your son." The name hung in the doorway like an accusation. They both flinched because they knew, finally, that I knew. Mom's voice broke into a new pitch. "We just want to see our granddaughter. We just want things to go back to how they were." Her plea was small and childlike. It reached for the old pulse of family, for the easy acceptance I'd once given. I thought of Maddie's little purple backpack sitting by the door, the one she'd packed and then had left sitting under the sun on that roadside. That image, small and sharp, was the hinge of everything. I thought of the word they'd used to excuse themselves, ruining the fun, and how casually they'd reduced a child's sickness to a problem to be disposed of. "Things will never go back to how they were," I said, "because that would mean putting Maddie at risk. That would mean letting her think that love is conditional." I felt the certainty in my chest like iron. I looked past them at the quiet street where nothing felt ordinary anymore, and I said plainly, "You said she was ruining the fun. That's the truth of this. Her needs got in the way of your wants." Mom gasped. Dad tried to shout something about sacrifices and hard choices, but the words sounded hollow. I closed the door slowly, deliberately. I slid the deadbolt into place and locked it. I didn't look back. The lock clicked like punctuation. Where once I had found excuses for them, I now found boundaries. After we closed the door on them, the house felt very still. It was a different stillness than the one that had followed that night on the road. This one was quieter, less frantic. It hummed with the kind of peace that comes from making a choice you know is right and living inside it. I walked through the rooms, Maddie's art tape on the fridge, Nick's half-drunk coffee on the counter, and felt the small domestic things anchor me. A month later, when we returned from Orlando, nothing about the outside world had changed, but something in our house had settled into place. The trip had been everything I'd hoped for: sun, rides, a parade of colors and laughter that taught me how quickly a child could let go of a bad memory when given room to make new ones. Maddie came home with a map full of stickers and a grin that didn't fade. She was louder and braver. She had chosen a small roller coaster and whooped at the top. There was a new photo on the mantle. It showed the three of us, me, Nick, and Maddie, sunburned and smiling in front of the castle. Maddie was on Nick's shoulders, clutching a giant lollipop that looked almost as big as her. That picture replaced the old one of the extended family, the stiff Christmas shot that used to sit there like an accusation. The new photo felt like a banner. This is who we are. Life settled into a quieter rhythm. No more strained family dinners, no more unexplained withdrawals. The hole in our calendar where family obligations used to be was empty, but it felt honest. At Maddie's school play, there were no grandparents from my side in the crowd. The phone was silent on birthdays where it used to ring with calls full of practiced affection. Those absences could sting, sometimes they did. I'd catch myself expecting a call and feel the echo of disappointment, quick and sharp. But the peace we'd bought was worth the absence. Our home felt like a sanctuary. I didn't have to calculate what my money would fix or what smile would be bought. The daily small things, making pancakes on Saturday, tucking Maddie in, helping with homework, weren't performances. They were real, unpaid, and unbought. I saw a post from Sarah, the neighbor who had sent me that tow truck photo. She'd snapped a picture of a moving truck outside Mom and Dad's rental and captioned it with a kind of quiet satisfaction. Their world had shrunk. They'd moved to a smaller place an hour away. I felt no joy in their loss, only a sober recognition that consequences had finally arrived. Sometimes, in the quiet evenings, I'd look at the mantle and the new photo and feel both a grief for what had been lost and a fierce gratitude for what we had built. I'd think about the little purple backpack with Barnaby tucked under its flap, now a symbol of safety instead of abandonment. I'd remember promising Maddie we'd never leave anyone behind, and I'd see how that promise had changed everything. We still had hard moments. There's a hole in a family you cut off that stays empty. But the life we were making had weight and warmth and truth. I'd traded pretending for protection, and in that exchange I'd found something I never had growing up. A family that chose me back. I picture that first phone call every time something small happens on the road now, like it's a scar that taught me how to move. The opening image of this story was me scrambling across gravel to a lonely shoulder, finding my daughter sitting on her purple backpack, stunned and crying. That memory lives in one corner of my mind, always ready to flare. But the ending image sits in a different corner, soft and ordinary. I'm in the passenger seat, the morning light spilling through the windshield, Nick at the wheel with his hand on the radio dial and a quiet smile that says everything's under control. Maddie is in the back, humming to herself, knees tucked up against the seat, Barnaby peeking out from under her arm. She starts to cough, just a little, a dry, childish sound. For half a second something in me tightens, the old panic reaching up like a shadow. Then Nick calmly turns on the blinker and pulls into the next rest stop. There's no rush, no phone calls, no one yelling that we're late. Nick shuts off the engine and I lift the latch of the back door. The air smells like cut grass and coffee from a truck stop. I climb into the back and sit beside Maddie, her small hand finding mine like she always does. I unzip her backpack and pull out a water bottle and a little pack of crackers I stashed weeks ago. The motions are small and practiced, water to lips, crackers in a steady rhythm, a hand on a warm knee. I tell her a story about a brave dolphin who learned to slow down when the waves got high. She laughs at the parts I make up, the laugh that used to feel fragile these past months, and I think about how many times I almost didn't get to hear it. We wait, we sit as long as she needs, sharing the quiet and the mundane and the feeling that someone will always be there. When she's ready, she leans against the window, eyes heavy, and I rest my head against the upholstery and breathe. This is our final image, not the panic of a roadside, but the calm of a rest stop, a child tucked safe with her bunny, a husband who will slow down, and the small, steady knowledge that we never leave anyone behind. If you've ever had to make a hard choice to protect yourself or your children, please share your story in the comments below. If this reached you, subscribe for more. There are more stories to come, and I'll see you in the next video.